Let's discuss moving MRP to the front of the class and how it can help you. What we mean by this is we're actually going to move some of the material planning functions up to the very front of the process, and by that I mean right to the point of sales order entry. But what this allows us to do is to actually anticipate need much earlier in the process. We don't have to wait for an MRP explosion. So we're in the middle of a sales order entry here. We're in the line item screen, and we're going to click new, and we're going to start to add a new order. And what I want you to take a look at is over here to the right hand side. We actually show quite a bit of information. We show you what's currently on hand, how many are currently allocated, and how many are on order. We also calculate a total available. So we have 131 units available at this point. They're not promised to anything else based on all of that information. So let's place an order for 200 units. Now I want you to look back over here again. I want you to take note that our total short in this case is going to be 69 units. In other words, we need 69 in order to satisfy our demand of 200. Now as we look down a little bit further, I want you to take note that the Create Shop Order box has been checked off automatically for us, and it's calculated a recommended shop order quantity of 100 units. In addition, our shop order's due date has been set to 1/29/16. So as we look back to our scheduled ship date, this actually matches. In other words, we're trying to match up the scheduled ship date and the shop order completion date so that we can actually ship our material on time. Well, the recommended shop order quantity comes from a number of things. What's happening here is first, we've determined, as we pointed out a moment ago, that we're short 69 units. We're not going to be able to satisfy our demand of 200 based on our current supply and demand information. So at the very least, we know that we have to order a total of 69 units in order to satisfy this demand. Now what the program has also done, it's applied some of the MRP rules that we can define in the item master. If you look here, you'll see that we have an order minimum quantity defined for 100 units. So in this particular case, what's happened is we are not only satisfying our 69 units, but we are also applying the rule which states that we don't order less than 100 of these at a time. As such, 69 does not exceed the 100 units, and the program has now recommended that we actually order 100 units in order to satisfy that rule and satisfy this customer's need. So that means we're going to have a few extra units in stock when we're done, available to sell and to ship to other customers. Now this is just one key part of this puzzle. We can take some of these other rules, things like our order minimum, we can take our order multiple, and we can even take into account things like safety stock. So that means that we're going to take most of those rules that are used by MRP as it's going through its calculations, and we're going to perform that calculation right at the point of order entry. So in this case, we can allow the system to make a decision for us based on the rules that we've defined elsewhere inside of the system. So now that we've seen how the sales order line entry process can actually begin the material requirements planning process, and it can actually anticipate and make more intelligent decisions for us, let's take a look at how it can help us on the back side of this. And by that I mean we're going the next step. We're actually going to look at the shop order. What we're doing here is we're actually going to manage not only the planning of our parent item MLRW-2, but we're also going to manage its sub-assemblies. We're going to take care of the scheduling of those. Now we can add that same level of intelligence to this process. In other words, we can take into account our material requirements planning rules, the MRP rules as they're defined in the item master. We'll see that on one of the sub-assemblies here. So what we're going to do to take advantage of this is we are going to change from a single to a multiple level explosion. Now what that's going to do for us, as you can see illustrated here on the screen, is we're going to take this complex bill of material which has sub-assemblies down below the parent assembly. When we encounter a sub-assembly, what we're going to do first is check our inventory, see if we have enough inventory available. And by available, we're going to do a calculation similar to what you saw in the sales order entry process. We're going to take into account what's on hand, what's on order, as well as what's already allocated or required by other things in our system. Once we know how many we actually have available, we're going to compare that to the quantity needed in order to satisfy this order. If there's sufficient supply to satisfy that requirement, we're going to go ahead and not create a shop order to produce this. If we're actually required to produce some of that particular subassembly, what's going to happen is that we're going to see that repeat. We're going to determine how many we should order, and it's going to take into account not only what we require on this order, what other requirements might be out there for other orders, as well as our safety stock level. If we need to accommodate for our safety stock, it's going to go ahead and handle that as well. So we're going to check off a couple of boxes here. We're going to tell it to combine requirements. That means if it finds the same subassembly more than once in this process, it'll combine them, make one shop order out of it for the total requirement, and it'll schedule it to be done in time for the earliest demand. Additionally, we're checking off our apply MRP rules. That means we're going to go ahead and take into account those rules that we've defined in the item master file. So we're going to click OK, and let's view the results as a PDF. Now when we do an explosion, we get what's called an audit report. That audit report tells us what the application was able to achieve, and if it found any issues, it's going to let us know what kind of issues that it found. Now in this particular case, you can see that the subassembly that I was looking at here, item 1000, ended up with a quantity ordered of 0. Why did it end up with a quantity order of 0? Because when it netted out all of our requirements, it found we didn't need any. Now technically, if you look at the total numbers here in the item master, what you're going to see is that there is some safety stock requirements for this. However, those safety stock requirements will only be satisfied, as I explained earlier, if we have a need to create an order for this. Now what that means is this: our supply and demand may not align completely correctly at this point in time. In other words, we may have orders out there that are due to come in a little bit later than are going to be necessary for this order. Again, we're going to allow the traditional MRP process to go ahead and let us know it's time to do some rescheduling in order to make our supply align better with our demand. All right, so we have another example that we're going to look at. It's the same item. We're using a different shop order in this case, and we're going to use the same settings. So we're going to change this to multiple, we're going to check off our combined requirements, and we're going to tell it we would like to apply our MRP rules. And again, let's have a look at our audit list and see what the results look like. In this case, we end up with a need for 400 of our item 1000. That's the wagon body. Now, we were able to apply inventory of 62 units in this case. We still are left with an open demand in this case. If we look at that, we subtract our 62 from our 400 and we get our total open demand. So why did the program actually choose to order 588 units? We actually had to order enough to satisfy the balance of our demand, or 338 units in this case. However, you'll notice here that we have some rules defined for our item 1000. And those rules include a safety stock quantity of 250 units. So those 250 units are actually going to be accounted for as we are actually creating the shop order for item 1000. So not only have we satisfied our initial demand for this particular shop order, but we've also taken into account our safety stock. We've once again moved the material requirements planning function to the front of the class. We're not waiting for an MRP explosion, which may occur days later, maybe even up to a week later, depending on the company that's using the MRP module. But instead, we're anticipating this demand now. We saw a need, we're satisfying that need, and oh, by the way, as we're satisfying that need, we're taking care of other things at the same time.